Hello, our learning target today is I can identify angle pairs. Right here you see two intersecting lines. Intersecting means that they cross. And we're going to talk about how angle 2 and angle 4 are related, as well as how angle 1 and angle 3 are related. There also is a relationship between the adjacent angles. For example, angle 3 and angle 2 are related, angle 2 and angle 1 are related, angle 1 and angle 4 are related, and angle 4 and angle 3 are related. So we're going to review some vocabulary with angles. Here you see two parallel lines and an intersecting line. When you have two parallel lines, and you remember parallel means that lines go on to infinity and beyond in both directions, and even though they do, they will never cross. They're the same distance apart. So if we have two parallel lines with an intersecting line, we have angle pairs as well. These two angle pairs go together. These two angle pairs go together. There's an angle pair here that goes with this. And then there's also an angle pair here that goes with this. So we're going to review briefly acute, right, obtuse, straight, and reflex angles, complementary angles and supplementary angles, perpendicular lines, parallel lines, and intersecting lines, as well as talk about vertical angles, corresponding angles, alternate interior angles, and alternate exterior angles. Okay, so here we have an acute little angle. That's my mnemonic device. Acute little angle, and acute angles are always less than 90 degrees. Here's a right angle. If you sit up right in a chair, here's your back and here are your legs before you get to your knees that bend. So that makes a right angle. Those are exactly 90 degrees. An obtuse angle is greater than 90 degrees. Right from here up would be 90 degrees, but it's less than a straight angle, which is right across. So they're less than 90 degrees, greater than 90 degrees, and less than 180 degrees. A straight angle is exactly 180 degrees. It looks just like a line. And a reflex angle is greater than 180 degrees. So for example, this would be an obtuse angle right here, and the opposite with an obtuse angle is a reflex angle. I would also see a reflex angle here around the acute angle. There could be a reflex angle here around the right angle. So I hope that helps you remember all of those angles that we've discussed previously. These two angles are complementary, meaning that they, when added together, they add up to 90 degrees. They're called complementary angles. 40 and 50 degrees make a complementary angle. 65 and 25 make a complementary angle because when they're added, you get to 90 degrees. Here, we have an angle that's 75 degrees, and you should be able to calculate what this angle X is because I'm telling you they're complementary angles. Angle X is 15 degrees. Then we talk about supplementary angles. Supplementary angles add up to 180 degrees. So 140 plus 40 is 180 degrees. These two angles are supplementary angles. From here, 115 adds to 65, and that gives us 180 degrees. So if I have this angle here, angle SRT, is supplementary to angle TRQ. So what do you think X is? If I add 9x plus 3x, I get 180. So 12x equals 180. So x would equal 15. So in here, my angle would measure 45 degrees. And for the obtuse angle, my angle would measure 135 degrees. So this was a brief review. Also important is measuring with a protractor. So we're going to talk a little bit about angle type and measure. Here's the angle, this blue angle, and I've marked the angle I'm talking about with this arrow. In other words, This angle here is another angle we could measure. This one would be called a reflex angle. But the one that's marked is an acute little angle. So if we line up our first ray with the 0, I call it our 0 ray, and we read over, we have 10, 20, 30, about 35 degrees. So this acute angle measures 35 degrees. I know that it's not, if you read this side up here, it says about 145 degrees. I know it's not 145 degrees because it's an acute angle. In reality, from here all the way around to here is 145 degrees. So it's the supplementary angles that this is measuring. You're measuring the two angles that add up to 180 degrees. For number 2, here's my angle. That's an obtuse angle. And if I measure here, I'm starting at the 0 ray, and if I read all the way across, I get to 125 degrees. I know it can't be 55 degrees because it's an obtuse angle. So it's 125 degrees. And here, I'm measuring the reflex angle. So if this is a right angle measuring 90 degrees, and I'm measuring the reflex angle, I could do 360 minus the 90 to find the reflex angle, because all the way around again is 360 degrees. So that gives the reflex angle 270 degrees. Okay, so we're going to look at some vertical angles. Here we have two intersecting lines, and when we have two intersecting lines, the opposite angles, angle 1 and angle 3, are vertical angles. And angle 2 and angle 4 are vertical angles. They're also the same measure. So angle 1 is going to measure the same thing as angle 3. And angle 2 is going to measure the same thing as angle 4, which makes sense. This is a line, and this angle plus this angle make a supplementary angle. Here, this angle plus this angle make a supplementary angle. So again, the blue angles are the same measure. They're vertical angles or opposite angles, and angles 1 and 3 are vertical angles. Here we have two parallel lines and an intersecting line. This angle here is the corresponding angle to this angle here. In other words, angle 1 is going to measure the same thing as angle 5, which makes sense if you look at the picture. It looks like that would work. Remember, angle 1 here and this angle are going to be supplementary. So next, angle 2 corresponds with angle 6. These are going to be the same measures. Angle 3 is going to be the same as angle 7. They're corresponding angles. And angle 4 corresponds with angle 8. So you can see that 1 is going to measure the same thing as 5, 2 is going to measure the same thing as 6, 3 is going to measure the same thing as 7, and 4 is going to measure the same thing as 8. Now remember, these are also two intersecting lines. So angles 1 and 4 will be the same, and angles 3 and 2 will be the same. So let's look at this. Here are all of our corresponding angles, and our vertical angles tell us that 1 and 4 will be the same, 2 and 3 will be the same, 5 and 8 will be the same, and 6 and 7 will be the same. The opposite angles measure the same because they're vertical angles. So over here, I know that angles 1, 5, 4, and 8 are the same. And angles 2, 6, 3, and 7 are the same. Before you're finished, tell me something that you learned or were reminded of and a question that you have.